Residency is one of the most debated steps in optometry after graduation. So, do you need it? Is it worth it? Especially the financial sacrifice. What are some of the pros and some of the cons? Well, in this podcast, I'm going to walk you through why you should or should not consider residency. Of course, touching on those controversial pros and cons. And of course, I'm going to share with you my personal experience doing so. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Ryan Corte, and welcome to Ryan Reflects. I am so grateful and glad you're here to tune into another episode. In today's episode, I'm going to walk you through my personal experience doing an optometric residency over the 2013 year. But I'm also going to kind of peel back the onion a little bit and talk about why you should consider residency if you haven't already done so, and some of the pros and cons. I'm going to dive into all of that. But first, I'm grateful you're here. I want to thank you for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like, that subscribe, that follow button. Leave a comment after the episode is complete. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on, what do you think? Do you believe in residency? Do you feel like it's not a valuable use of time for an optometrist? Just kind of tune in. Let me know. So we're going to start off with, why do a residency? Well, in optometry, as most of the listeners know, you don't need to. It's not a requirement. We get all of that clinical education during our fourth year externship. And while it is very valuable education and experience, a residency gives you kind of a peek behind the curtains before going out on your own in highly intense clinical settings. It also can help you specialize, right? So it can help you really build confidence in certain niches, whether you want to be an expert in specialty contact lenses, binocular vision, pediatrics, ocular disease, primary care, and all of those different facets have a place within optometry. They're all wonderful subspecialties. So if you want to be in a position to really feel extra confident before getting out and seeing patients on your own without any kind of mentorship alongside or oversight, well, residency gives you that opportunity to do so. It also gives you the ability to, if you want, go to a VA medical center and kind of dip your toes in that setting, or have the ability to teach a little bit in academia and see what it's like to work in academia, or to join a larger ophthalmology clinic with high volume ocular disease, very intense environments. And of course, it can open up doors, right? Speaking, consulting, and advancement opportunities. So to me personally, those are a number of the advantages or pros of doing a residency, right? That building that clinical confidence, specializing in a certain subspecialty, and really getting good at ocular disease, gaining exposure to different areas within the profession, different modalities, teaching, academia, the VA medical center, and of course, career advancement opportunities. But let's talk about the cons. And I think the number one con is delaying the opportunity to make an optometric salary. And in some cases, that salary difference, that delta between what a residence is paid and what a new graduate optometrist is paid is substantial. We're talking six figures, not including all of the math you can run on with compound interest of student loans and any debt repayment, as well as investments. That lower pay is a huge rate limiting factor, and probably the number one reason I hear optometrists are foregoing residency in 2025. It's also a little bit of a delayed start on quote unquote real world experience in practice management, patient care. And I'll never forget being in residency, being a resident, and we'd have a number of experts come and talk to us about, you name it, all sorts of clinical settings, all sorts of disease states, and even practice management. And they'd keep referencing, when you get out in the real world, or, when you become a real world optometrist. And to me, that was almost a little bit frustrating because, hey, we already are optometrists. We opted to do this additional year of clinical training and expertise, not because we couldn't have gone out and seen patients right away out of graduation, but we wanted the extra experience. We wanted to keep those doors open, and we wanted to just kind of take our clinical experience to the next level. So That is another, I would say, drawback or con. And then, of course, it's really not necessary for all practice settings. If you know 100% that you don't want to have any kind of specialization with an optometry, you don't want to speak, you don't want to consult, you don't want to work in academia or in the VA medical center, you don't want to keep that side of the profession open to you. You want to do direct patient care and that's it, and refer out any kind of advanced clinical care that could be provided by an optometrist, but you would send it out to either a colleague or an ophthalmologist. Well, a residency is probably not the best time value spent immediately after graduation. Now, I have met people who have foregone residencies, and they said, "Oh, let's go ahead and dive back in." After seeing patients for a couple of years, they would apply for a residency and they'd do it. It's not very common. It's kind of hard to go back from making a six-figure salary to the small amount of money that a resident is paid nowadays. But I've seen it. And those people, well, they may have had a little bit of a coming to Jesus moment where they're like, yeah, I really wish I did it, and they regretted not doing so. So the pros and the cons are real. I feel like the current landscape of an optometry residency, though, the controversial nature of it is it comes down to dollars and cents. And, optometric education is getting more expensive, and just the cost of living in this world that we live in is becoming more expensive. And that clinical experience, a number of doctors who have foregone residencies, well, they would argue that you can get it eventually. Me personally, I feel like it's bundling up 5+ years of clinical experience in to 1 year. And you come out, you're kind of like shot out of a cannon. You have the opportunity to really manage patients to a higher level. Your comfort level is just very much so noticeable. And so I personally believe that that is one of the greatest reasons to do a residency. You have a long career ahead. Why not start off hitting the ground running? It was somewhere along my 4th year, and I'll never forget Dr. Joan Sears at the Salisbury VA Medical Center. Well, she told me, "Hey, Ryan, you're going to do a residency." And I looked at her and I'm like, "No, I think I'm going to go into private practice. I want to buy a practice. And I just don't see the need for it. I feel very confident in my clinical skills. Of course, I still had a long way to go now looking back, but I felt good about the education, didactic and clinical, that I got from Ohio State and the extern programs that I had signed on to." And she said, "Well, if you don't do a residency, I feel like you would leave yourself a little bit short in keeping a good third or half of the professional doors open for those who really value a residency for speaking, consulting, networking, career advancement. And even if you want to work at the VA Medical Center in academia, there's just a number of people that they look at a residency as a necessary part of the process." And at that time, I was thinking about it and I was like, okay, I don't want to close any doors. And I was in a position, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have kids, I didn't have a whole lot that I had to worry about outside of paying back my student loans. So I wasn't necessarily in a position where I had to jumpstart the journey and get out and get a job right away. And so I was intrigued. And so I started to look into the process, and I applied to a number of residencies. The ones that I actually interviewed at that I was highly interested: Bascom Palmer, the SUNY ocular disease residency, and the ICO primary care and ocular disease residency. And I remember going and interviewing in all three, loving them all. And it's actually kind of funny. I went to the one at SUNY, and somewhere during my optometric education, I was encouraged to buy a suit plus a tuxedo, right? So I had a number of suits. So I take that back. I already had suits. I was encouraged to purchase a tuxedo. And it was for a lot of these black tie events, being involved in the American Optometric Student Association. I had to go to a number of those events. I can say that doing so, yeah, it saved me some money and it was packed away in my closet. But going to that SUNY interview, I will never forget waking up, pulling out what I thought was my suit, only to have a stepbrother's moment. It was a tuxedo. And so I wore the tuxedo. Well, maybe I didn't wear the bow tie, but I wore the tuxedo to the interview, great experience. You get asked a lot of questions about why you're there. At all three, I really did. And, but just had to laugh that I packed the wrong product, right? The wrong attire. And I'll never forget. I always double check now with suits that are kind of within casing. all wrapped up and good to go. I always zip it down, take a look, make sure that I have the appropriate attire there. But I really appreciated the interview process. I think if I remember correctly, I went to ICO first, SUNY second, Bascom third, and I ended up being between ICO and Bascom. And the reason I ranked ICO number one for me personally, I was comfortable with the Midwest. I love the idea of going south, but I also really wanted to stay and practice to the highest level from an optometric perspective. And I felt like Bascom Palmer, I absolutely could have done that, but there was just so many ophthalmologists around that I felt ICO had kind of tailored things a little bit more to practicing at a high level as an optometrist, medical management, and and so I made that decision. I also felt just being in the Midwest, it was the right fit for me. So when you go about evaluating your residency, it's one thing to get the experience, another thing to do I want to go explore another area of the country? Do I want to stay local? Do I have a feeling or a calling? And I prayed about it and I selected ICO and I was fortunate to be matched. So I selected that program really because it was a larger program. It had 10 total residents, five of them primary care and ocular disease, one cornea contact lens, a couple low vision, a couple peds. And two, I thought it would be interesting to go to ICO because that was my number two choice for optometry school. I was really between ICO and Ohio State. And so I was intrigued about a year in Chicago, treating and managing patients on the south side of Chicago, where I know that it was essentially a very undermet population. So I matched, you get that email. It feels great to see you match the program you want to be at. And I can tell you that transition from graduating in optometry school at Ohio State and then going immediately about a month later or so to residency, it was a weird one. I felt it was a little bit lonely almost. You move from one environment, you spend all these years, and you may even feel this way even when you're graduating and going straight out to the workforce to a location where I had my sister and I had some friends, but big city, and I felt like the transition was just kind of unique. I also didn't even realize it, but I was training for a half marathon, and I didn't realize that I was under the weather while doing so. I ended up getting diagnosed with mono. I still ran the half marathon. Um, Probably not the best decision, but I did so. And so it was a weird transition that January or that July and August to kind of start out. Also, when I got there, 8 out of the 10 residents were already ICO grads. They had known each other so very well, and they were so cold to me. I'm just kidding. They were great. They kind of welcomed me with open arms, and I will still tell you to this day some great friendships. But I really appreciated Chicago. Appreciated the ability to be within a facility where the faculty was top notch. They highly value their residents. They invest in your growth, their development. You do all sorts of um, you walk through a number of case studies. You have a number of meetings. You have to present your own cases to the faculty. You have to present posters. You have to do all sorts of things that continue to push your optometric development. What also was part of that process was teaching. And so I didn't really pick that up during the interview as much. I knew that we had to work alongside students, but teaching second year labs, overseeing and being a preceptor for third years and even some fourth years. That was unique. I didn't know if I would actually really like that part of the program, but I grown to really enjoy it because you have the ability to take the information that you had learned and digested and reinvest in, really essentially your colleagues right behind you, but the future of the profession. And so it opened up a ton for me from just that initial experience. And after a few months, I felt really settled in with just the relationships. I felt settled in with the city and was able to quickly dust off any of that loneliness or just almost like anxiety coming into the program. And the clinical training, well, I felt like it was top notch. So I already knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to come to North Carolina. I knew that I had to take the board in either the summer or the winter. So in my head, I was like, why not take it in the winter? And I can't practice there until I'm done with residency anyway. And so I had a ton of ocular disease, on-call emergency experiences. In fact, I'll never forget, I had a patient who was on steroids for uveitis, ended up having a ridiculously high pressure in both eyes, got a call, troubleshooted it, triaged it, and the reality is I probably could have done a better job trying to figure out, why was she experiencing discomfort, and came in, pressures were, like I said, really high. We were able to get the pressure down, but it's one of those aha learning experiences and moments where I saw steroid response. I saw something that I should have asked more questions in that environment, in that scenario. And it opened up just my mindset of how do we go about clinical decision making, especially after call, after hours, on call. But all of that experience helped me feel really confident coming back and taking North Carolina boards in the winter before I would even have the ability to start practicing that summer. And so I did, and I passed, and I felt great about it. But it also, that exposure to academia was one that I was not entirely sure that I would like or not like. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed kind of seeing a peek behind the curtains of how academia works, from the various rules and the organizational structure. And I still, to this day, and I did a podcast interview with Dr. Eric Mothersbaugh, who is on, he is part of the administrative team, the executive team for ICO. And his initial feeling and his initial drive to do the residency was continue to go and work in academia, and he has flourished in that position. So I feel like there's a lot of people that will do a residency and they will go into academia, and they can kind of see it's almost like a trial period. Um, I loved it though. I really did. I actually thought about staying on or interviewing with other schools after residency was done, but I knew I wanted to get down to North Carolina. And so I can tell you that my confidence coming out of residency was extremely high with the treatment and management of ocular disease. I was able to achieve my goal, which was passing North Carolina boards. Could I have done it the summer before and came out and started seeing patients that fall? Absolutely. I most likely could have. Maybe wouldn't have been as well versed and trained in the pinnacle of my didactic and clinical um, career, especially from just the studying and the approach and having the ability. But I also knew that if I didn't pass it that winter, I had the chance to retake it in the summer. And some of those relationships, those individuals that work within ICO, near and dear to my heart to this day, really, really grateful for that experience. And it has opened up a number of doors within speaking, consulting, networking, collaborating. If you have done a residency and you've gained a lot of experience doing so, and you have some stories to share, definitely drop those comments in the comment section below. But if you also, you're like, hey, I hear you on all this, I still don't feel like it's worth it, I want to hear why. Let me know that as well. One of the gaps or things that I felt probably is something that any residency could amplify on is that practice management side, billing, coding, the red tape of healthcare. And the truth is, I don't think residencies are designed to really fully get you entrenched in that. But man, that'd be a really nice value add to include in a residency, because it is tough when you get out. You're really trying to learn all that. And depending on what you do, whether you open cold or you join a team or you take a sublease, or it's a valuable thing to do, to have a better understanding of the billing, the coding, the healthcare managerial side of the equation. The big picture, I will say pros and cons. Me personally, I'm extremely grateful that I did one. Awesome experience. Came out, felt like I was shot out of a cannon with like a good 5+ years of ocular disease and patient care. And I also dabbled in, right? I was a primary care in ocular disease, but I dabbled in specialty contacts. I was able to see pediatric patients. I was able to see low vision patients. So I was able to absorb a lot of the experience that those residents were getting as well. So I really think the niche of the residency that you're in, or the subspecialty, is critical. I can tell you right now, some of the most highly sought after residencies in optometry are that cornea and contact lens residency, because everybody's really dialed in on the ocular surface and the specialty contact lens side of the equation. You can get some really awesome experience doing so um, in those residencies. And I predict more and more of those residencies will pop up, but they're hard to get, right? All this being said, if you choose to do one or you don't choose to do one, that's totally on you. Make sure that you spend the time kind of putting together a list of pros and cons. If you're faithful, pray about it. If you're somebody who just needs some time to reflect on it, think about it a lot. Start asking your mentors, those around you, gather all the information that you can, and then make a decision. I personally believe that whether you go one way or the other, you won't regret it. Very few people do residency regret it. Very few people don't do residency and regret it. It kind of just it comes down to, what do you want? But I believe starting your career off with a residency, especially if you're going to be practicing a good 30 to 40 years, keeps those doors open and is extremely valuable for those who do so. So that's all I have for you today. Make sure, again, that you like, subscribe, comment, and stay tuned for my next podcast, where we can reflect and grow stronger together.